Hi, Caleb with Brownells here, and in today's tech tip, we're going to be going over the first video of our How to Build an Accurate AR series. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and be super upfront about it. Some of the information I'm going to give you here may be different than what you were already taught or someone already told you about building an accurate AR. And with that being said, I'm going to give you the why. Every time I tell you something that I think will contradict something you may have already been taught, I'll tell you why. Alright, so just don't go crazy in the comment section just yet. Save that for the end and then, go as crazy as you want to. Alright, so with that being said, let's go over the parts we're going to be using. First off, we're going to be using a Silencer Co. billet upper receiver. I selected this one because it just fit nice and tight with the barrel I was using. And the machining on it is good. And actually, I pulled this one off of another build that I had already done that I know shoots well also. Okay, so the upper receiver. The barrel, we're using a Brownells Mark 18 barrel. This one is a little bit more of a premium barrel, but whenever you start talking about accuracy, honestly, you need to expect to pay a little bit more of a premium. Although, a lot of the tips we're going to be covering you can do with pretty much any barrel and any upper receiver and stuff like that. But this is what we're going to be using. This is an 18-inch. And then the Geissele Mark 18 Handguard. We're choosing this one just because, honestly, first impressions, I just really wanted the versatility of having that arc rail on the bottom. So I can swap bipods, tripods, kind of whatever I want to do with that. But it's also a super rigid and solid handguard. And I'm not saying like super rigid, like Geissele has a super whatever. That's what I'm calling it. It's not called the super rigid. If you're familiar with Geissele and the way they name stuff, you'll get that joke. All right. And gas block, we're going to be using the Rifle Speed adjustable gas block. As far as adjustable gas blocks go, this is by far the best one on the market because of how easy it is to adjust and take apart and clean and stuff like that. So that's what we'll be going with. And I went ahead and attached the gas tube because that's another step that we've done 1,000 times. I didn't feel like we needed to put it in another video. If you need help with that, you know where to find it. We've already done it. And we are using a JMac custom muzzle brake that attaches to a chemo suppressor. So that chemo mounting system. Alright, so with that being said, let's talk about things to look for whenever you're selecting components. Alright, so upper receiver wise, you want to choose a quality upper receiver, and you may be thinking, what's an upper receiver? Mil-spec is mil-spec. And yes, you can certainly use a mil-spec upper receiver. You don't have to use a billet one. Mil-specs will work just fine. But mil-spec is not mil-spec. It's forged, then it's sent somewhere to be finished machined. The quality of that company finished machining is going to be the quality of the part you get, right? So there's not 4 forges, bro, like you read on Facebook. Okay, so let's do a quick visual inspection here. And what I typically do whenever I pick up an upper receiver is I'll look at the back of it, and the area I'm looking at, let me grab a pointing tool for pointing that I can point with. Not that one, because it's in there. Okay. So if you look at the back of your receiver, you have this wall right here, this wall thickness, and the one on the other side, that wall thickness. I'm just looking to see if one or the other is noticeably wider. And this one does have a chamfer here, so you got to be aware of that whenever you're looking, because it'll create a optical illusion. And I'm looking at that because if everything is bored down the center, the wall thicknesses should look the same. You don't need to get crazy and put a caliper on them or anything like that. Just do a visual inspection. And also, if they're not the same, chances are your gas tube hole will be slightly off center one way or the other. That's why that's important. You always want your gas tube hole directly over your barrel extension area here for obvious reasons, because you don't want your You don't want it to have pressure on it one way or the other, and I'll get to why on that a little bit later. Also, something we didn't cover, bolt carrier group. You want just a quality bolt carrier group, and I could go on, what bolt carrier group to pick is a whole nother video on its own. Just get a bolt carrier group from a reputable manufacturer and you'll be just fine. I'm not going to say Brownells bolt carrier groups are the best ones, but they certainly work great, okay? So, can't go wrong there. Also, if you're using a Criterion barrel, which Criterion makes great barrels for a project like this as well, you can get a bolt that's matched to that barrel extension, which is also very nice. Okay, so that kind of gives you a good indicator of what to look for on your upper receiver. Also, you can take your bolt carrier group and just slide it in and out, make sure everything goes nice and smooth, nothing's binding in there. And that's really all you need to do. As far as charging handle goes, you can use mil-spec, whatever. Charging handle's not going to be a big deal. Okay. So now that we know what to look for on our upper receiver, also, you can't forget the forward assist, right? So I'm just going to go on a sidebar here for a second. We were doing some videos in the past about forward assist, and y'all were going crazy in the comments talking about how it's like the sniper button, and you like push it, you got to like pump it up like your Air Jordans for more accuracy or something. I don't know. Anyways, that's not true. Don't do that. Okay. Now, let's continue on a little bit here, and let's talk about things to look for on the barrel. So, on this, we're using a rifle length gas system. Like I said, gas system's not a huge deal. Or gas system length. Gas system is a huge deal. Gas system length is not a huge deal. That's going to depend on, what barrel you want to use for this project. Like I said, we're using 18-inch. If you do pretty much 18 and longer, you're pretty much going to end up with a rifle length gas system anyway. But things to look for on your barrels, your muzzle crown, okay? So the muzzle crown is this area right around here where your rifling ends. That is very important. That's the last little bit of input this barrel has on the bullet before it's in the air, okay? And any kind of imperfection or anything there will definitely affect your accuracy, your group size, all that stuff. So you want to pay close attention to that whenever you're selecting a barrel for this. So, and whenever we're doing projects like this, speaking of which, I don't like to recommend you order. I mean, you can order parts 1 and 2 at a time, whenever income allows and stuff like that. But don't start building until you have everything and you can actually inspect your parts. So as parts come in, inspect them and set them aside when you have all your parts for the project, then jump on it, okay? Alright, so yeah, crown on this one looks perfectly fine. And another thing I want to talk about here is the shoulder. So at the end of your threads, you have a bit of a relief cut here, and then you have your barrel shoulder. So you want to, and I've seen, the reason I say this is because I've seen some pretty unacceptable ones coming from a few different places here. And you just want to make sure that your shoulder's nice and square, the relief cut actually exists, because if it doesn't, when you screw on your muzzle device, what should happen is the face of the back of that muzzle device should hit the face of that shoulder, and if there's a relief cut there, that transition down to the threads isn't going to throw it off one way or the other. I've seen some threading jobs where there wasn't a relief cut and the muzzle device bottomed out before it hit the shoulder and it was canted one way or another. This is a really big deal, especially if you're shooting a suppressor. That's going to give you some baffle strikes. Even if you're not getting baffle strikes, you could still definitely have some accuracy issues. Okay, so let's move on back here to your feed ramps. Feed ramps, more of a reliability thing than an accuracy thing, but you just want to make sure that there's no big burrs or anything like that on there. And just do a visual inspection. If it's not right, it'll be pretty obvious. Okay. And feed ramps, I should point to them with my tool here. These are your feed ramps right there. And we'll talk about feed ramps a little bit more as we get into it. Okay. And handguard, I mean, things to look for on a handguard is that, I mean, honestly, if you're getting a handguard from a reputable manufacturer, they should all work just fine. But one of the things I really like to look at and consider is the barrel nut. So, Geisley handguards, they use an aluminum barrel nut, but the aluminum barrel nut they use is pretty long. It's a little bit longer than most barrel nuts. And the reason I like long barrel nuts on a AR15, especially one that has a longer handguard, is that they add an extra source of rigidity, if you will. Because whenever you have a short barrel nut and you have a long handguard and you start hanging stuff on it, you can get some flex and some deviation there, and that's not what we want. But with this handguard, this barrel nut, that's not going to be an issue at all. So something to consider as well. Okay, now time for the controversial stuff, right? So if you were to Google building an accurate AR-15, chances are something about barrel bedding would come up. And I don't want to say it's not necessary in every single case, because honestly that wouldn't be true. On pretty much any of your modern component stuff, it shouldn't be necessary. I use the word shouldn't because we're assuming manufacturers are making things within spec here. I know that's a huge assumption, but that's important to state. So let me talk about what that is for those of you who don't know. So when you bed an AR-15 barrel, what you do is you take, I think it's the green Loctite, and then there's some other bedding compounds people use and stuff, but you would put it on your barrel extension, and some people use shims as well. Not something I do. I'll get into that in just a second. And then they put it in the upper receiver. Then they let it harden, and now any theoretical play between your upper receiver and your barrel extension should be taken out. So obviously, if this is a really sloppy fit, this one's a terrible example because it's a nice tight fit, but if it's a very sloppy fit, it has room to wiggle around inside of that upper receiver. So in theory, that can cause some accuracy issues because it's not going to be consistent every single time, right? And when you first think about it, it's okay, yes, that makes sense. You do want that to be tight. Obviously, having that tight is good. That's why companies like JP, Bravo Company, they do thermofit type stuff, right? Thermofit's good. That's great. But even though it's super helpful, it's not necessarily required, and I'll tell you why. I'm not knocking thermo. I would buy thermofit all day long if I was building super accurate ARs. But if you're not buying the thermofit, do you need to bed now? No, you do not, and here's why. Okay, let me bust out my whiteboard because I'm gonna show you why I think it's not necessary. And if at the end of this you still want to do it, great, go for it. You do you. And I'm not. If I see that you're doing it, I'm not gonna make fun of you for it. That's your thing. All right, so we got the whiteboard busted out here. First off, excuse my drawing skills. I'm doing this to help you, okay? All right, let's say this is the front end of our upper receiver. All right, there's our threads right there. Let me stabilize my hand here and draw it a little bit bigger. Okay. All right, front end of our upper receiver. That's the threaded portion. All right, there's our barrel or upper receiver threads, right? Okay, now let's say that our barrel is inside of it. So this is the front shoulder of our barrel extension, and that's our squiggly lined barrel. Okay, So our barrel's in there. Now, let's say there's a little bit of space between the barrel extension and the upper receiver, which a lot of AR-15s will have a little bit of space there unless you're buying a thermofit, right? So, in thermofit, if the name doesn't do it for you, thermofit is just, you have to heat them up to get them together. Thermofit, right? Okay. Alright, so now let's say there's a little bit of space there. We didn't bed it, we didn't put a shim in it, you know, whatever. So we're screwing our barrel nut on. Well, what happens when you put the barrel nut on? So we take our barrel nut, and let's say this is the front shoulder of our barrel nut. And this is like imagine with me, if you will, this is a cutaway barrel nut. So this is the front shoulder of our barrel nut, because the front shoulder of your barrel nut pushes on the front shoulder of the barrel extension right here, okay? Or more accurately, right there. So it mashes these two shoulders together. All right, and then our barrel nut obviously covers the threads. All right, and then it's wrapped all the way around. And this is like we'll make a longer barrel nut. Yeah, there we go. All right, so that's our barrel nut. And this is what's going on inside that barrel nut. Now, whenever we're torquing down this barrel nut, it's not pushing against the receiver. It's pushing this shoulder against this shoulder, okay? So as you're torquing that down, let's say you get into, you know, your 35 foot-pound range or whatever. You know, you bottomed out, you're torquing down, you're applying torque. So as these two surfaces are pushed together here, or these two shoulders, and then it's pulling on these threads as well. So the threads are kind of wanting to pull this way. These two shoulders are pushing up against each other. Everything's under torque now. The more torque you apply, there's no room for anything to go. But if you look at the front, this is the front view of your upper receiver on my dying Sharpie. I'll draw it over here. So this is the front view of your upper receiver. You know, this is, we'll just say like, all right, that's our top rail there. That's our lug on the bottom. That's our gas tube hole. All right, so that's our threads. Okay, so as you apply torque, there's no room for any material to go. Aluminum is flexible and it's soft, right? So what happens is this outside diameter here, or this inside diameter, is actually going to constrict ever so slightly. So now all of that play, or that little play that was between your barrel extension and your upper receiver, because this is constricting, that play no longer exists. So you'll especially see this if you lap, or if you bed your upper receiver. A lot of extra Loctite or whatever you use is going to be pushed out because of this effect. So that's why I don't think it is at all necessary to bed your upper receiver, because as you torque it down, it constricts and gets tight, and as tight as it needs to be. Now, you'll hear people say like, oh, I'm a world champion shooter, I bed every single one of mine. Okay, awesome. I'm not going to tell that person to stop bedding their barrels, because that's how they do it. They're winning matches that way. Chances are, if I built them a gun, did this, but told them it was bedded, they would never know the difference. Okay. And this same principle applies. If you remember when we had Mike Mahalski from Sons of Liberty Gunworks on in here, we were talking about over-torquing your muzzle device. It's the same exact concept. Remember, we took a muzzle device and we over-torqued the heck out of it, and we got a rod stuck at the end of the muzzle that wasn't stuck before we over-torqued. This is the same exact principle. You can see it plain as day in that video if you go back and watch that one. But it's even more prevalent on the upper receiver and the barrel extension, because that's aluminum. Everything we were torquing there was steel, so we had to put a ton of torque on it. But on the upper receiver, you don't have to put nearly as much torque to get that same effect. But in this case, that effect works in your favor versus against you at the muzzle device. Which leads me to my next point. Don't over-torque your muzzle device. Over-torquing your muzzle device will constrict the end of that rifling slightly. And again, the last little bit of input that rifling has on your bullet is now inconsistent, and that could affect your accuracy and your group size. Okay, so with that being said, also, and we talked about this in another video, and I had somebody approach me about it and say, hey, you know, I bedded my AR15 and it, like, my group size is phenomenal. I say, okay, great. What was your group size before you bedded it? I don't know. It's a new build. It's like, okay, you can't say something fixed a problem if you never knew you had a problem in the first place, right? Makes sense? Okay. Now, again, with that being said, that's how I do things. That's not how you have to do it, but hopefully that explains, like, the reason to my madness, or lack of madness. Yeah, we'll go with that. I don't know. Anywho, let's continue on to the next step here, and that's going to be lapping your upper receiver. Now, I've seen some really good quality upper receivers not need any lapping whatsoever. I've seen some really bad ones that should probably have been lapped, and also everything in between. I've seen some that should have been really bad quality but didn't need lapping, some that should have been good quality, and you get where I'm going with this, right? So I would recommend just checking to be sure. This one I haven't done any lapping on whatsoever. The anodizing is all still there. So let me explain what lapping is real quick. So what we're going to do and how this works, what it is. So this is the Brownells lapping tool for upper receivers. This is precision machined. Everything's nice and concentric where it should be, right? This goes into your upper receiver. This portion guides along the inside of the receiver on your bolt path there. And then this face that is relief cut will press up against that part where the receiver extension shoulder mounts up against your upper receiver shoulder. And then lapping it, because this tool is true, right? We don't know if the upper receiver is true. We know this tool's true. We're going to put some lapping compound, which is just an abrasive compound. And then we're going to spin this tool to cut the receiver. So this tool is steel, the receiver is aluminum, right? So that receiver is gonna give way before this tool does. And our compound will just cut the face of this receiver to be true like this tool. And you'll be able to see it as we do it. Alright, and we have that there. We'll set that aside. And the lapping compound we're using, I have the Wheeler Engineering 220 grit lapping compound. It says stir if separated. And listen, I've had this for I don't know how long. I opened this thing and it was like dry as could be in there. But I put some Croil in there to kind of lubricate it back up and mix it up. But yeah, it says stir if separated. This stuff was not separated. This stuff was divorced, like zero custody. This stuff was dry, all right? I think Croil's okay to put in there. It looks fine. We'll see if it's not, you know? All right, so that's what we're going to be using. All right, so let's get to, let's just kind of jump into the build. If I think of anything else kind of along the way, I'll fill you in as we go. All right, so what we're going to need here is a way to hold our upper receiver. So I'm just going to use this Wheeler Engineering upper receiver block. Alright, stick this in the vise here. Alright, now on the actual lapping rod, what I like to do is take a little bit of oil or grease or whatever you want to use and put that on the shaft itself. And you don't need a ton, just a bit will be just fine. Alright, we'll put that on there. And this is for the inside of the receiver. You don't have to use a grease like I used. You can use whatever oil, whatever gun oil you want. Let me get that ejection port open. All right. Okay, so you can see I just slide it in just till I get to that relief cut right there. And the reason this relief cut is even there is so that your lapping compound doesn't wrap underneath around and then you start lapping the inside of the channel, making a loose fit even worse, because that would not be good. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and apply the lapping compound. And whenever you do this, it's very important not to overlap, and I'll get to why that is shortly. Alright, put up our Action Lube Plus, take our 220 lapping compound, and I'll just use my tool I've been using to point at stuff, and I'll use this to apply it here. But all we're going to do is just apply it to the front of this tool. And that'll be enough for now. I'm going to reapply more after I check, assuming I need to. And the first lap I'm going to do, I'm going to do it very lightly, just so you can see actually what's happening whenever you lap it. Alright, so I'm going to need a hand drill here, and I'm just going to attach that to this rod. And now I'm just going to run it right up against there. I'm going to apply a little bit of forward pressure here. Nothing like crazy. I'm not going to bear down into it like crazy. But you do want to apply a little bit of forward pressure. And this drill is not chucked. Perfectly flat there. There we go. Alright, and whenever I do this, what I like to do is take my rag, because you can see some lapping compound got on this rod here. I'm going to start about halfway, and I'm going to push towards that relief cut, as to not spread any of the lapping compound down the rod, right? And then with my index finger, just going to wipe the inside corner of it there. I'm going to wipe it all off. You don't need to wipe it all off every time, but I'm going to do it so you can see what's going on. Alright, so as you can see, the lapping tool, now I got my tool I used to point all covered in stuff. Okay, as we were. As you can see, the lapping tool took off anodizing down here, but not up here, which means this is our high spot. So if we were to put the barrel in and torque everything down, this would be this area right here, this high spot, and this is a pretty big high spot, which is a good thing, right? So this area here would be where all the torque and all the pressure and everything would be, and not so much on this part where they're still anodizing. And I've seen some where like the high spot was very small, like maybe just this area right here, which is kind of concerning because that little bitty spot is taking all of the force, which over time can kind of get beat back from recoil and stuff. And then once that gets beat back a bit, then everything's not as tight. So that's the whole purpose of doing this, have everything nice and flat and true, and so that it remains torqued down how you have it, right? Okay, so we're just going to keep on going with the lapping tool until this whole face is lapped. So let's do that. Alright, so if we take a look now, notice that we have a nice ring all the way around the face of that now. Alright, so this is true. It's true. The face of this is true to that bore, which is what you want. Okay, so that is lapping the upper receiver. The last thing you need to make sure is that you get all of the lapping compound cleaned up. So I'm going to take this here, take my tool, probably going to throw that rag away because I'll end up wiping something with it I don't need to wipe with it. Alright, and we just got to clean up, get all that lapping compound out of there. You want to make sure you get it out of all the threads. So what I typically do, use some compressed air if you have it, some solvent, spray it down on there, and then blow it out. And you also need to make sure you get it out of that indexing pin slot, which is this slot on top here. Make sure you get it cleaned out of all that. So we're going to go ahead, make sure we have this nice and clean, and of course the inside, right? We're going to make sure we have this nice and clean, and then we're going to continue. Alright, so now our upper receiver is nice and clean. We can start putting stuff together, and what we need to do at this point is put the upper back inside of our tool. We'll throw this back in the vise. And now we can install the barrel. Now, what we'll do is get rid of our lapping compound. We're going to use Brownells Action Lube Plus. Don't get this mixed up with your lapping compound, right? And we're going to take a little bit of it and put it on our barrel extension. Just a little bit. That was actually very generous. You don't need any more than that, right? We'll push it, or actually, we'll put a little bit on the inside shoulder here. Anything we can do to now protect some of that raw aluminum right there. I'm just gonna kind of work this around just to kind of spread out that grease. Then I'll push my indexing pin into its slot, just like so. Alright, now I'll take a little more grease, just a little bit on the threads there, and then a little bit on the front shoulder, because remember, like during like my painting happy trees segment, I drew a picture and I showed where the torque was being applied, and this front shoulder was pretty important in that illustration. Alright, so we put some grease there. Now we can take our barrel nut, slide it on over, and hand tight. And this will be different, you know, depending on the barrel nut you use. We're using the Geisley barrel nut here, so our tool is going to be a little different. And I'm just spreading that grease around right now is all I'm doing. Okay, so here's another interesting thing I wanted to point out here, because if you look at some of the manufacturers that claim they're making very accurate ARs, you'll see that they're putting quite a bit of torque on their barrel nuts. And if you're a custom bolt action guy, you know that putting a ton of torque on your barrel in your bolt action rifle is not a great thing for accuracy. The reason these two things are different is because you're putting torque on a barrel nut, right? Not torque on the actual barrel itself. So if I were screwing this barrel into this receiver and putting a ton of torque on it, yes, that would be counterintuitive for accuracy, because I'd be putting a ton of stress on the actual barrel itself. Here, I can put a ton of torque on this barrel nut, and it doesn't really add any stress to the barrel itself. All right, to an extent. So, and the reason the reason that they're putting a lot of torque on it is because whenever you put a lot of torque on it, that threaded portion of your upper receiver shrinks a little bit. It compresses whenever you put a ton of torque on it, like we talked about earlier. So that's why they're doing that. All right, so I'm just going to take my barrel nuts wrench here. And this one's actually for a HK416, but it works great on these Geissele barrel nuts. Okay, so torque wrench. So if you look at the instructions that Geissele provides, they usually say, I think, 40 to 50 foot-pounds. We're going to kind of feel that out, and we may increase from there. All right, 90 degrees. All right, and what I'll do at this point is back it off and retorque. Get those threads nice and married up to each other. And I think I'm actually going to go 10 more foot-pounds on that. Like I said, I would kind of fill it out. And I haven't used the Geissele aluminum barrel nuts for doing one of these accurate AR builds before. This is a first for this type of barrel nut, which is why I'm kind of filling it out here. Alright, so now we can just remove the tool here. Alright, oh, and so I completely forgot that I was going to tell you what happens if you overlap your upper receiver. And now's actually a good time to show you that. So remember we talked about the feed ramps. And if you look in the bottom of the upper receiver here, you can see the feed ramps on the receiver mating up to the feed ramps on the barrel. And those are nice and smooth. Now, if you overlap this upper receiver, now your barrel is going to sit too far back, and you're going to have some overlap on those feed ramps. And then that can cause some feed issues, right? So obviously a very bad thing. Not only that, but with your barrel sitting further back, your bolt's going to sit further back. And this cutout right here in your upper receiver is for your cam pin. And if everything's sitting too far back, that cam pin can start digging into your upper receiver, again causing issues. There's a common misconception that overlapping will cause headspace issues. No, it will not, because your bolt is already headspace to the barrel extension. It has nothing to do with headspace, but it does have a lot to do with the function of your firearm. Okay, so let us continue. Got that. Okay, so now from here we can just go ahead and install our gas block. This is the rifle speed adjustable gas block. Now, I want to note this barrel is not dimpled for set screws. Under normal circumstances, I would dimple it, but I'm actually going to pin this one to the barrel before everything's all said and done. So I'm not worried about that at all. Now, what we need to do is make sure our gas block is aligned. So, something else I want to point out here. And I'm trying to get this in position to kind of show you here. If you look where the gas tube goes into the receiver, you can see that, you know, it's kind of favoring one side of the receiver or the other, and There's been a lot of talk about how you need to have your gas tube perfectly floated in the middle of that hole right there. If your gas block's properly aligned, that will kind of automatically be in the center, right? That makes sense. But one of the things is, a lot of people talk about the harmonics of the barrel whenever it's, you know, favoring one side or the other. Honestly, that's not that big of a deal. It has more to do with whenever the gas key of your bolt carrier group is locking in to the actual gas tube itself. If it's favoring one side or the other, it's going to be hitting one side after every single shot, rather than hitting directly in the center all at once. And you can start to see wear, a lot more wear on one side than the other. And potentially it could eventually cause some binding issues. It's more of a function thing than an accuracy thing, to be honest with you. Alright, so we are going to go ahead and align this gas block and tighten everything down. So when I'm tightening everything down, I'll typically take the back screw do my alignment. If I can find it. There we go. Alright, and before I drill this, I actually check it with a bore scope. I look down the actual gas port hole in the barrel, make sure that's aligned with the gas block. And, alright, let's tighten that down. Alright, now for the handguard. We'll just slide that over. And no, I don't ever put, even if I'm not pinning that gas block, I still typically don't put any Loctite on those screws. Because if your barrel's getting hot enough, it doesn't really matter that much anyway, right? I just properly torque everything down and you'll be fine. Alright, so we tighten this down here. Take our Geisley screws. Alright. And these screws just go right through here. And it says max torque is 8 foot-pounds. So just don't exceed that and you'll be fine. I typically just go 50 inch-pounds on those. So I torqued the front one, I did 50 inch-pounds. I'm gonna do the same thing on that back one. And I'm just gonna double check both of them. Okay, so also you have these set screws right here. Words are hard today. So we're going to take these set screws and snug them up against the actual receiver. So we'll just need a driver for that. Alright, there we go. All we need to do at this point is install our muzzle device. And we're going to need some shims for this one. I'm just going to kind of see where it falls. It's actually really close. We may not need any. Yeah, that's going to be close. We're going to go ahead and throw the torque wrench on this. And I'm just going to go 35 foot-pounds on this. All right. Perfect. And we just kind of got lucky. Usually I would have to go a little bit, just a little bit more or a little bit less to get it timed perfectly, but we're right where we need to be. Alright, and as you can see, our gas block is adjustable without removing the handguard. We just reach up here, grab it, and if I actually go the right way with it, I could demonstrate here. But you can just reach up, open it up, close it, and you don't need any tools, which is great, especially if you're running a suppressor. So some of the benefits of this gas block here, obviously the quick adjust. So if I'm shooting without a suppressor, I have it tuned, I know what my number is without a suppressor. I then throw a suppressor on, I can tune it and just remember my number for running a suppressor. And if things start to get dirty, my gun starts to run a little bit sluggish, I can just reach up there, open it up, and don't have to worry about taking off the handguard or fighting with any of that stuff. Alright, so the next part of this, we're going to go over things we can do to our lower receiver to help accurize our AR15. And I didn't cover optic mounting in this. We've done a ton of stuff on how to properly mount optics, so go check out that content. I'll link it down below if you're watching this on YouTube, just to kind of keep everything nice and one place and easy to find. Alright, so if you have any questions or comments, anything you'd like to add, just anything I didn't explain well enough that you just want to know an answer on, let us know in the comments down below if you're watching this on YouTube. And as always, feel free to give us a call on the tech line. We'll be happy to help you out. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.